Putin has been living in an alternative reality for a long time, and that's especially true of Ukraine. It's what you might call dictator syndrome.
Специальная военная операция идет в строгом соответствии с графиком.
Whether it's Stalin or Hitler, there comes a point with any strongman leader where they don't want to hear bad news.
Ukrainian fighters have fought the Russian military to a standstill, defended their capital and forced a retreat in the north.
To send a report saying, actually, they're not that into you, Vladimir, would mean demotion or worse.
Because the independent media and journalists are always very critical of what's going on in the country, Putin thinks that this is a conspiracy against him personally, and this is a conspiracy against his power.
The U.S. accused Russia of using food as a weapon in its war against Ukraine.
And I think this is Putin's revenge. This is Putin's revenge for the fact that he didn't get the welcome he thought he would get. So he's decided he's going to annihilate a country and its people. Vladimir Putin becomes president of Russia in 2000. The Western world, Tony Blair, Bill Clinton, and then Bush, they think this is a man we can do business with.
And we had a very good dialogue. I was able to get a sense of his soul.
When 9/11 happened, Putin was the first person who called the President of the United States, George Bush, and he offered him his full support. Back then, the Russian-American relationships were great. And it lasted until the war in Iraq.
Putin makes this rather wonderful sounding speech about how Russia will be a place of freedom, of tolerance, where citizens are treated with decency.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
Pretty quickly, though, it turns out that actually what Putin says and what he does are completely different.
Цензура и вмешательство в деятельность средств массовой информации запрещены законом. Власть строго придерживается этого принципа.
What actually happened soon after he took power is that Putin decided that he wanted a much more controlling state. And the thing he wanted to control most of all was television.
Putin started his offensive against the independent media in 2000. In the beginning, he cracked down the NTV channel, which was the most professional television channel in the country. After that, he came for independent magazines and newspapers. Since 2000, this process have never stopped.
There was one program in particular, it was like sort of Russian spitting image, which portrayed Putin as a rather kind of evil dwarf. And Putin saw this, and the next week, the show was gone. Russia is entering a new, darker phase, and I think at that moment you would call it soft authoritarianism.
Putin considered a free press as a threat because he does not believe in the concept of truth. Truth is propaganda for him. That's how they were taught in the KGB.
The KGB has always had an unforgiving code. I mean, it used to run around and harass and try and entrap foreign diplomats, send glamorous young women to seduce them on the Trans-Siberian Railway, would bug their apartments. And also it had a separate set of rules for people that the KGB regarded as traitors. It was prison cell, and in some cases it was execution. All of that kind of stopped in the 1990s, and with Vladimir Putin, we see a return where suddenly critics, in particular prominent critics, nasty things started happening to them.
Anna Politkovskaya was a very well-known journalist, not only in the country, but also outside the country, and she had a huge reputation as a journalist. Anna was targeted because she had the best sources inside Chechnya. Chechens wanted to be independent, and that's caused the military conflict. Anna Politkovskaya was killed in October of 2006 in the entrance hall of her apartment building. And it happened the same day when Vladimir Putin was born. It was his birthday. It was a very specific, intimidating message to all independent journalists in the country. Don't write about Chechnya.
Do you think she knew that her life was in danger?
She knew this for I don't know, for many, many years. If they were so brazen to came after Anna, they can came after everybody.
As well as these sort of fell domestic deeds, we see something astonishing that we hadn't seen since the Cold War. We see the assassination of prominent dissidents, most spectacularly Alexander Litvinenko.
Alexander Litvinenko was the former KGB officer, and he came against Putin. And he came against Putin openly, which caused a lot of bad consequences for him.
I was threatened with the murder of my 6-year-old son. Since then, my persecution has become more intense.
Putin personally fired him from the service after he was sort of whistleblowing on corruption. Litvinenko flees to London, and then in 2006, 2 Kremlin assassins poison him with a radioactive cup of tea containing polonium-210, and he dies this terrible, agonizing death in University College Hospital, London, and you can see a photo of him on his deathbed. That, to my mind, is one of the defining images of the early Putin era.
The message which was sent by this assassination was very, very clear. All enemies of people must die, and they must die in a very terrible way. Only state could possess polonium, so it attributed the assassination to the Russian state.
Между тем, насколько мне известно, в медицинском заключении британских врачей нет указаний на то, что это насильственная смерть. Нет этого. Значит, нет и предмета для разговоров подобного рода.
What's fascinating about the early Putin period is that at a time when Putin is being domestically repressive, interesting things are happening in his backyard. We see pro-Western reform movements in countries like Georgia.
The color revolutions was mass protest against the rigged elections in Georgia, then in Ukraine and Kyrgyzstan. And as a result of this mass protest, the presidents, they just lost their power.
We read those uprisings as spontaneous movements by young people who just want a kind of better, more democratic, more decent future. Putin came to the opposite conclusion. He thought they were essentially the work of the CIA. I mean, his thinking is impeccably KGB.
As a KGB man, Putin does not believe in equal relationship. You can be only a winner or loser. That's why he operated in such a strange way for the West.
If Ukraine can become a successful, prosperous, democratic state, then obviously that poses a pretty existential challenge to the model in Russia, which is repressive, autocratic, and not much fun. Putin's notions of imperialism is that Ukraine is essential to the idea of Russia as a great power. It needs colonies, it needs a zone of influence, it needs this spiritual and historical kingdom. And so as far as Putin is concerned, Ukraine has to cease existing. Otherwise, eventually, Russia itself may cease to exist.